guys are awesome. Kristy and Andrew, thank you so much for joining us for this really powerful and deep dive into your story. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Good. So am I. So we're going to jump right in. Kristy, I want to talk a little bit about your mentality around what can you learn. You look at your everyday with that kind of as one of your mantras. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's important to you and how it impacts the way that you live your life?
Absolutely. Well, I think, we're going to talk a little bit about risk, us both being poker players and coaches. But what this emphasis on learning and lessons does is allow me to really give myself permission to take risks, knowing that no matter what happens, if I fall on my face, if I look silly or I fail, that there's something to be learned. And it really is the opportunity to learn, because how much do we really learn from when everything goes smoothly and we just win or everything's good? It's like, okay, yeah, that's great. But when everything falls apart, such as what happened in our relationship at one point, it was really the opportunity to learn about myself, learn about each other, and where maybe we can come back to some sort of synergy. And it's really all about, actually, which I think is awesome because this is the topic really of this summit, is it allows me to give myself permission, knowing that I'm going to learn something.
Yeah, I love that. So Andrew, to kind of counterbalance what Kristy was just talking about, what is your definition of fail? Because Kristy, I noticed you did it kind of like a, what do you have to say to that, Andrew?
Well, for me, the definition of failing, or even failing in relationship, would be really, I guess, not putting 100% of who I am into the relationship. The only way I saw that I could fail in our relationship was if I wasn't willing to put 100% of myself as a man, as a husband, as a friend, as a provider. If I wasn't willing to do those things, and then walk away from the relationship, because as she alluded to, we had a really turbulent time in our relationship. I knew that it wouldn't have been what we had possible that I was walking away from. I would have been walking away from something that I was half in, that wasn't an accurate representation of what we could have. So to me, failing would have really been just not going for it 100%. So, yeah.
I like that. That's really good. And I think that it's so powerful what you just said too, around if you're walking away from something, or if you're choosing that failure, it's because you didn't necessarily put yourself all in and didn't give it a chance. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, we both coach, and part of the how to, or the reframe to empower ourselves, is that we look at failure and success, not the result, not whether we went out and asked a girl out on a date and she said yes or no. We don't frame it as that success or failure, whether she says yes or no, but rather, did we go for it or not? Did we put our ass on the line or not?
Did we prepare?
Yeah.
Did we focusing really on the process, really, and not so much on the outcome?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Well, then it becomes super transferable to anything else in life too. Mm-hmm. If you're working on the process instead of the outcome. I like that.
Yeah. I just say one more thing about that that's interesting, is that it allows us to remove ourselves from, I think a lot of times we put a lot of our self-worth in whether or not we get something done, or if we succeed or if we fail. And I think it's really great because it allows us to remove some of the meaning that we place on a success or a failure. So
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I really like.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you guys say that, because I have really been working inside of my community around the word success and how we kind of overuse that and make that something that we're constantly striving for, when that should be changing all the time. Okay. So you guys alluded to some tough times in your marriage. And you have since then chosen to do some pretty intentional and impressive work on your marriage. You don't have to go into details, but at what point did you guys realize that this was something that meant something to both of you to fight for? Because sometimes it's easy to the goodbye is easier than staying in it when things get rough. What are some practical ways that you chose to be intentional about your marriage?
Well, I can start. I think, so for me, when everything kind of came to a head in our relationship, we were at that point where it was like walk away or like come back into it time. I knew that what was at stake, and I really had a sense of how important it was to get this right. And so I was able to recognize that, first of all, as like how important this was. And I knew that this would be something that I would regret for the rest of my life. It wouldn't be that like I let a relationship fail or I let it end. It would be that I didn't know for certain that the woman of my dreams was either in my life or out of my life. And for me, I really needed to be clear on if I was letting that woman walk out of my life. And I knew the only way I could know that is if I gave 100% of myself in every moment in our relationship. And I figured if I did that, if I do that day in, day out, if I when she's upset, if I listen, when she's irrational, I'm apologetic, whatever it is, like I'm just like connected, and I'm being the man that I always envisioned who I want to be in relationship. And then after the end of 2 months or 3 months or however long, and then it feels not right for us both, then I can have some sort of peace to walk away. And I think what I found, which was so beautiful, was I focused and I leaned in on that every day. And it was challenging and it's messy and it's not what people think. And a lot of people praised me and us for doing the work because it's so challenging. And like challenging is such a word that like you can't really understand until you're in there in the messiness of it. And what was so beautiful about it was through all of that, like we just started to fall more in love because we just loved each other more and cared and listened, and we're building the relationship that we actually wanted. And it was just such a valuable experience for me. I just,
yeah, so valuable, not just for our marriage, but for our lives in and out of our relationship. And what I really want to touch on, because I love what you said, because it really takes on this idea of responsibility. And in relationships, sometimes we want to say, you're half responsible, I'm half responsible, you take some of it, I'll take some of it. But the only way that we made it through when we were like at the brink of divorce, where we were like, we're gonna separate unless something changes, was that at different times it became both of us taking 100% responsibility for the success of our relationship, not just half and half, but both of us coming together. And as we both grew that, like if one day I wasn't feeling it and we were getting in a fight, if he was showing up 100% responsible, it would call me forth too. And it grew from there. And there's a couple things that I think are really important, because I know, especially in today, we have 50% divorce rates. We have people who are getting married later or not at all, who want to. And so what really carried me through, some things that I would just really want to impart on the audience or anybody who's really struggling, is that the only way a relationship gets to both taking 100% responsibility is that someone has to go first, right? Like we all want to say, well, I'm not going to trust him, or I'm not going to put myself all in until he shows me that he's going to do that or whatever. But the truth is, somebody has to be willing to go first. And you have to ask yourself, is this what you want? Is it? Because if it is, you've got to be willing to go first. And different times, each of us went first. But, and then the other thing is that there were times where we were just, like he said, in the message, like it's messy. There's like crocodile, ugly cries and tears. And we're just like sorting through things. And I remember, because we were kind of like moving, and we didn't feel good in our house, and we didn't want to sleep in our bedroom. And so we were, one night, for a few nights, we were sleeping downstairs. We had like a 3-level condo, upstairs bedroom, middle kitchen and living room, and downstairs this loft that we never really spent any time in. But we set down this, and I know we don't have to go into details, but we're healing from infidelity. And so like we together were like, okay, we're not going to sleep up there. We're going to put this spare mattress on the floor and sleep down here together. And one night I was by myself, or I was with you. You were sleeping and you were just laying there with me. And I think you had your arm like over my waist. And I was just like feeling sad and crying and just like wanting to like fall asleep, but I couldn't. And then I just lay there and looked around, and there was like light shining down from like the second floor, and it was glinting off one of our picture frames. And I just looked around, and we just looked so happy in that. And I just thought to myself, like, you know, this is messy, but isn't this also really beautiful? Like, look at what we're doing right here. Like, we're just sleeping on the floor together, him and I, just trying to figure it out. And isn't that, and the thing is that I found that beauty, and I hung on to it like it was a balloon, and this was the string, and I was hanging on for dear life to that beauty. And I focused on that and let it expand. And that was like another thing that gave me permission to love regardless of how sure I was if I was going to be loved back. It's just like following that beauty.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you guys both said. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Andrew?
I just said it's powerful.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, because you're not saying that in the mess that it always means that you do the work, you show up 100%, both of you, and that it works. Because sometimes you show up, you go through the mess, and the decision is that it's not going to be something that's lasting.
Right.
And I think that's powerful too, to just give some permission around, as long as you've done the work. Like, as long as you can say to yourself, I showed up, I brought myself, I brought the best of me to this relationship. Sometimes it's not meant to continue. So I like that. That is really beautiful too, with the balloon metaphor around it expanding. The growth inside your relationship is pretty impressive. Can you share a little bit, because you've also had another loss and a process of grief inside of your marriage. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of your miscarriage? I know that there are some that are watching. It's one of those topics that people don't talk about. It's kind of silent. I don't know what to call it, but it's definitely very silent. Share a little bit about that from both of your perspectives, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Can we start?
I can go first.
Okay.
So after we've been together for, I mean, at the time that this happened, it was around 11 years, 12 years. And we had been probably 2 or 3 years into rebuilding our relationship. And we're both very certain that we want to have kids, and we've been trying for a while. And the emotion of, finding out that I'm going to be a dad was like something that even right now is, brings up emotion. And it's something that we both wanted so much. And so when you surprised me and you were, I'm pregnant, and it was just like all of the things that go into it, immediately there's like worry, like every day is like, are we going to have a healthy baby? Are we going to miscarry? It's been, like do all the tests and follow up. And at some point, I think I was able to just kind of let go of all that and realize, like, this is where it starts. Like, I'm never going to not worry. Mm-hmm. Like, as soon as we have the kid, then now I'm going to be worried about, like, when they get sick, and then when they get sick, and then, then he's playing outside in the tree, and then I'm worried about the tree, and then when he goes to school, are the kids going to like him? Is he going to, so it's just, this is the worry that starts. So, like, I'm going to own this. This, like, comes with the territory, and knowing that it's not in my control. And so then, on that night when you woke up, and I could just feel your energy, and I knew kind of what was happening, I think the supporter in me came out, where all I wanted to do was just be with you and be there for you, because I know that it's like a much more intimate, challenging thing for you in a way, because, you know, you're the one that's actually carrying the child. And I just felt so, for me, it was also like an experience and like another layer in our relationship that like made us stronger. It's another story that is like written into our beautiful book that, in a way, like I wouldn't trade, because it's just like all these things are like, they shape us as people, and we learn so much about ourselves through these processes. And also, you know, not just like understanding that like we do the best we can, and we just, that's all we can do. And then everything else that happens in the world, like those are the things that happen. And so that was like the real logical side for me. But I also recognized like the emotional side that, you know, you were going through as well.
Yeah, I just even get emotional seeing you get emotional, saying like how excited you are to become a dad. And as a woman, as a wife, it is something that obviously not only do I want, but also I feel like carrying and creating a human in my body is like something I just want to like give as a gift, you know? And when the miscarriage happened, I think it's natural to look for reasons for what I did wrong. And really, I mean, we talk about worth and permission a lot, but like, or we have already, but really in this, it was like, what am like, what is my worth as a woman if like maybe I can't do this? And what will happen? Like, is he still going to love me? And all of these things. And what did I do wrong? Did I stress too much? Did I worry too much? Did I work out? Did I do yoga too hard? And and what I really learned is that sometimes there are just, actually not sometimes, pretty much all day, every day, everything that we think is certain, there just will be questions that go unanswered. And it's okay. And bringing it all back to the opportunity to learn, what I learned is my capacity to love, and that I will be, and he will be, a great parent. And for the short amount of time that this spirit was like in our lives, it created so much joy. And of course there was pain in loss, but only because we got to experience love so intensely for such a short amount of time, for a thing that like you know, like you can't even, like, how do we even like know what to call that? And I, in you know, since then we haven't been able to conceive again yet, but it's teaching me a lot about patience and wanting things now and slowing down. I already feel like our future child is teaching me this lesson of how to slow down, you know? So, yeah.
One more thing that you touched on, I think that was really, I'm just like taking myself back there, and the permission, I think it was really important, because there was a few days and weeks after where, you know, you would feel like really bad, or like just like in this energy of like sadness and crying. And I think something that I've really learned through a lot of the work that we've done, and through this experience, through the affair, everything, it's to not quell the emotion that's there. Like the emotion that's there is like, express it, you know, and it's okay. It's like, you know, like, yes, obviously, like we want you to be productive and like live a life and not like be in a room for a year or something like that. But like express your emotion, allow yourself to feel how you feel, give yourself permission to do that. And I think that was a really beautiful thing for me to sit through, because as a man in the relationship, I think men, like, typically we want to fix and we want to like solve and we want to help. And like my mind immediately goes to, okay, like she's feeling this way, like what can I do to make this better? How can I fix this? Like how can I make her happy? And sometimes that was just like sitting there with her while she was, you know, crying or whatever. And that to me was like, you know, I just remember like sitting there and being there and thinking like, like almost like feeling enlightened. Like I don't have to excuse my language. I don't have to solve everything, you know? I mean, in my mind, all I want, like, I just want to like fix and do. And it was just like a great reminder. And like for one of the first times in my relationship to just be, to be with you and not, you know, that's it. And it was really beautiful.
Yeah. Like I at first I felt, you know, why am I still sad? It's not like it was a real, I didn't have it, you know, but it was real to me. And what he's saying about permission for each other, when we allow ourselves that permission, we light the way for others to heal and not resist what is, which will, what we know is what we resist persists. And I think there was one moment where we were just laying there and we were like, this sucks. And we were both like, this is the worst. Everything sucks right now. And then but then we, as soon as it was like acknowledged and we were in it with each other, it started to move, you know. You know, yeah.
Well, and so first of all, I want to acknowledge both of you and say thank you for both of those topics and conversations around stuff that can sometimes be messy and icky, and to call back those memories. So thank you for that. What would you say to people that are watching that might not have experienced either of those things, but have people in their lives who are? Sometimes we miss out on experiences to be enlightened or to enlighten others because we don't know what to say. What would have been some things that would have been helpful for you, or what do you know to be true that might be helpful for those that are wanting to support others? If that makes sense. I might have not made that clear, but. No,
totally. I think that it's interesting because at first nobody could say the right thing at all. And that was okay. Like I got that. But what really made a difference is, well, one, I think that even if we aren't going through what most people would say is some huge life event, we still all, and this is something that Andrew says and helps me build and connect empathy, which is sometimes more natural for him than can be for me at times because I'm just like a goer, but is that we all suffer in some way, and we all question ourselves, and we all worry if we are lovable. And when these huge life events like a miscarriage or healing from an affair happen, we can connect to our own suffering regardless of if we've had some huge life event. And what it really takes, at least what I appreciated most, was anybody who is just willing to sit with me and be in it with me in the suffering. Not try to change it, not try to shift me or say the right thing, because often there isn't the right thing. It's just connect to that empathetically and just be in it with me.
That's what I would say really is that I learned so much in this process, and you're totally right. There would be times where there would be nothing that could be said. And for me, I think one of the biggest things that I'm like really sensitive to is energy, like the energy that people have, you know, if it's like, is it a frantic energy? Is it like an angry energy? Like you run into energies every day. And I think anytime that I could feel someone like show up genuine and authentic and loving, like it didn't matter what they said, you know, and I felt that I had support, and like that was all that I needed. And even if I just said, yeah, thank you, I don't feel like talking about it, or whatever it was, I felt that like that lift in energy, and that oftentimes, like, it's hard to describe how far that can go, but that was huge. And also the not needing to fix it and to just be with me. And I think a lot of times, here's the other thing, I think people get uncomfortable with certain things. And like I could be in a conversation with someone, and you know, maybe us three are having this conversation, and then someone else is sitting here that's maybe not sharing about it, like that maybe they want to change the subject, or they want to like oh, oh, it's okay, like, don't feel sad or whatever. It's like, when people get into that is like when that's like the only thing for me that like makes it kind of challenging. So as long as people are willing to just be there with you, it goes so far, for sure.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's interesting because as humans, I feel like we are not very good at quiet spaces in between conversations and in between statements. And I think a lot of times when someone's going through something or sharing or being vulnerable, we rush to say the next thing. That if we would just sit, like you said, Kristy, and just sit and just be, and not try and shift the discussion or shift away from discomfort, we would stand to learn a lot more from each other, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what really got us through. Not only through, but thrive because of, is this willingness to be in the discomfort, be in the sadness, and be in it. You got to be in it to heal it.
Yeah.
It's just true. And what I really believe all of our journeys is to find a way to cultivate that for ourselves and for others, because that's what creates intimacy. That creates permission to risk and go for it again.
Yeah. I love that you just said it allows you to thrive because I think a lot of people lean right into the thrive in spite of, but to say because of is pretty powerful.
Definitely.
Okay, so you segued us perfectly into the next topic of discussion around risk. All right, you guys both are pretty risky folks.
This is true, yeah.
You pretty much are. I mean, by nature of what you do, by the way that you guys live your lives. So let's shift gears a little bit. Andrew, you were born in Germany. You're an Army brat?
Yes, yeah. My father was stationed in Nuremberg. That's where I was born.
Okay. So you were born overseas. Where in your childhood, or where do you think you can look back and say that your obsession with risk come from? And second to that, do you think risk is necessary for that word again, success?
That's interesting. I haven't really thought about it to this moment, and I think it's really clear to me that from the time I was really young, I was always like going to a school for a year or two and moving, and it was a really hard thing as a kid to go through. And I knew that I was really grateful for that experience as I grew up, because I've always kind of considered myself a people person. I love interacting with people. Kristy, my wife, will tell you, I bring home people all the time. I'm like, babe, I met this couple. We're going to dinner with them, and I think we're going to spend New Year's with them. And just like
all the time. All the time.
Yeah. So,
he does anything to bring people together. He even bought a short school bus because he thought it would be fun to take all of our friends.
Yeah.
Like, so one day I came home, sorry, I'm interrupting, but I came home from a work trip and he's like, so babe, hear me out. I bought a bus.
That was a risk.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely love people. I love to be the one to bring people in. And I think, when I think about risk and when I think about from the time I was young, at some point I realized that like, when I was a kid, it was just so important to have friends. Like I just wanted to have friends and I wanted to be liked. And it took me a while to really figure out like, and I'm a strategist too, in a way, like what's the optimal strategy? Like, how do I like make friends? And I just started just like going for it with people. Like every time I'd move to a new school, like I would just like, okay, I need to make friends like today. And so I would just like go in and penetrate friend circles, which was like a really scary thing. And, just like, hi, I'm the new guy. And like, really just risking in that way from the time I was really young. And actually this is interesting to think about too. And I think about this because like I had a lot of, like I would say I was like one of the more popular kids growing up. And when I think back on why that is, I feel like probably the biggest reason is that like I did risk in relationship with all these people, but also I genuinely just listened to people, and I love people, and I wanted to like give them a space where they could feel heard and seen. And that was something that I learned from my mom when I was really young, because she did that really well for us. And so I just mimicked that like everywhere I went. And it was like, oh, people really like that. So I'll just do that. And so that, along with risking, I think allowed me to kind of adopt that. And what was the second part of the question? I'm just trying to circle back.
The second part was whether how much risk you think is necessary for success. So if someone's not like organically built for risk, how does that formula kind of measure up? And maybe then a follow-up question to that is, how do you cultivate risk if that's not something that's part of your DNA or part of something that you grew up with?
I think like the way where it starts for me is just familiarizing yourself with the uncomfortable, because I think by nature risk and being uncomfortable are kind of go hand in hand. And so if you can just kind of first like recognize the areas where you're uncomfortable, you can use that almost as like I always say, like using fear or like what makes you uncomfortable as like a compass, you know, like if it points you north, like anything that points you into something that scares you is probably something that you need to look at least, if not go into. So just start noticing where, if you're not so used to taking risks, just notice where you get uncomfortable or notice where you have some fear. And then once you're kind of present to it and aware, then you can slowly start to take risks. And a big part of it is being patient with yourself, you know, not making yourself wrong for saying like, oh man, like I knew that, you know, I said I was going to do this and I didn't, and then go into this like negative self-talk place, you know, but rather say, you know what, like I'm still like trying to figure this thing out and I'm really trying my best, and I'm gonna do the things that I do, like meditate, or for me, exercise. I'm going to come back with a fresh mind and I'm going to try it this again. And I think that's really important, because it can be really easy to take down the whole ship with you when you do or do not risk.
Yeah. Well, and that's important too, though, the do or do not. Like you can take it down with you if you don't risk, and you can take it down with you if you do. So yeah, really good reminder to have the reset. So what do you think about risk, Kristy?
This is something that I say all the time, because I just believe it, which is that anything that is like what's between what we say we want and what we currently have is usually just fear. And the way that we move past through is through taking risks, getting outside of our comfort zone. And if you are just begin risking every day, your life will transform. It's just how it works. And when you mentioned, how does one cultivate this transform relationship with risk? They're naturally risk averse. And you said so many good things, and I just wanted to kind of like make a framework around that, which is, one, what you do is like have a vision for what it is that you actually want, whether it's relationship, whether it's career, job, ways of being, confidence, whatever it is. Visualize it and create a really specific vision, and really to build some like practice of taking risks and to take some energy off it. It really helps if you actually visualize yourself taking a risk, whether it be being honest with the person that you love or going and asking someone on a date. You envision it happening, and then you ask yourself, what within me would stop me from committing this risk? And then you'd be like, oh, maybe it's fear, I get anxious. And then you ask yourself, okay, if that happens, what will I do? Okay, well, I'll take a deep breath and I'll just start moving, or whatever it is. And then you visualize it actually happening. And what that does is it just really removes some of the energy, because it's almost like it's a muscle memory that you know what you're going to do should that thing come up that's going to stop you. Yeah. And then you said so many good things. Like the other thing is to always be aware of your self-talk when it comes to taking risks, and what the self-talk is around whatever result you have. What meaning are you making out of the result? And what also helps is 3 is writing down your certainties. What you really know is certain. Yeah, like, is it true that if I go for this and I don't respond that I'm like a jerk or a butthead or something. No, it's not true. Like, well, what is true? Or going for that job. What's true is I have all this experience, right? And that takes off some of the judgments that we make.
Yeah.
And then the last thing about risk is having people around you in your life who challenge you, call you forth, believe in you when you don't believe in yourself, and hold you accountable. Yeah. They're like, I mean, he did it to me last night. He asked me, like, are you all in? Are you all in? Are you taking the biggest risk possible? I'm like, no, I'm not. And then like, I didn't sleep last night because I was like, you're right. And I spent all night just like building this thing. And then I woke up at 8 this morning, like no sleep. So that's important. Surround yourself with people who will.
Something else too, that just around risk that came up for me is like, we were kind of speaking earlier before we started about this key that I'm wearing.
Yes.
And the key says courage, and I put it on every day. And I think that word for me is the word that like rings in my head. And like when I put it on, I think about being courageous, because risk isn't necessarily like I would say that it's somewhat natural for me, but it still requires a tremendous amount of courage. And like courage, I think a lot of people will say, you know, it's like being afraid and doing something. And for me, like that's really what the definition is, as recognizing that there is fear and moving through it or towards it, not saying that there is an absence of fear. And I think that that's a really big distinction. So I think for me, like, I love this word. It's like an affirmation I tell myself every day when I put it on. And there are times when, like in my career, if I'm in like a big poker decision for like a lot of money, or if it's even in a conversation that you and I are having, or if I'm in a training and I'm going to like, you know, raise my hand and say something, there's fear there. And it's like, it's just a reminder, and it's right here. And it's always to be courageous and trust myself, you know, and know that if I am courageous and I fail, there's something really valuable in that for me to look at. And I think part of the reason why I've been so successful in my career and my relationship and other things is because I've been willing to fail, and I own my failures. And I think those things, and we talked about this last night, and, you know, we're talking about having children, and you're like, we just want to protect, and, you know, we want to like do things for them. And we're already like thinking about how we want to parent and stuff. And it's like, when we don't allow our children to fail, like we are robbing them of like becoming the people that are going to, you know, have these experiences and learn about themselves and learn how to risk and all these things. So, you know, risk, courage, going through the fear, and yeah, those are all the things.
I love it. Well, and I think that's so true, because I know that as humans, we look at other people who are doing great things and amazing things, and they're successful, and we assume that there's a lack of fear, that they're able to just get up in the morning and say, I'm going to go do this amazing thing. But their courage is that they're working through it, and they're acknowledging it and saying, I see you, and I'm still going to go do this thing. So I think that's super important that you brought that up. As we start to kind of shift towards the tail end of this, you guys have mentioned you guys are both professional poker players. You've been in the limelight. You are no stranger to it. Part of what happens, though, when you're in the limelight, and even when you're not, just by going about our daily activities, you can end up putting yourself out there, and you get everyone else's opinions of you right back. Kristy, you've shared a little bit on your website about some comments. You have no talent, you look weird. We all have that happen. Some have it more publicly than others. What would you guys both say to people who have had experiences or are fearful of putting themselves out there because of the backlash and the possible opinions that can come back? How do you put yourself out there, know that it might be coming, and then respond either graciously or put that past you? That was a lot of questions in one, wasn't it?
That's okay. It is a journey. It's always, I mean, it still is for me. And what I will say to that is, I have heard the saying, if you want to avoid criticism, do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. But that's not even true. If you do that, people will still criticize you for not doing anything.
Yep.
And so a couple of things that help me, which is that one, the energy or the projection, the negativity that they're putting at me is coming from a place of hurt, is coming from a place of anger or sadness or loneliness, and then it's not really personal. Like, sure, they're talking about me. I'm the only person with that name that they're saying that they would not, I'll keep it PG with a 10-foot pole, but whatever. It's like, okay, whatever. But like, it's coming from, it's really not about me. Yeah. And the other part that has helped me brush it off faster and faster is the ever-growing certainty that I have about who I am and my worth to the world. So as I continue to cultivate that and make that a priority and give my own self-love and be kind with myself and who I am, it really just kind of is like a protective shell for that stuff.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about, I think it's such a great question, and kind of like playing off too a little bit more about the risk thing going into this is that after I decided in my life about 4 years ago, when we decided to save our marriage, it was like, I'm risking every day. I'm going for it all in, all the way. I really started to transform my poker career. And, in doing that, I've been able to, I'd say I think it was in 2015, I had a breakout year where I was in the World Championship of Poker. It's a $10,000 buy-in, and first place, and that's almost 10 million. And it's like the big tournament of the year. And I was nearing the end stages of it. I finished in 28th, and the last day they interviewed me for this magazine, this big poker magazine, and they asked me. They said, "You're going to be playing poker on television, ESPN. Like everyone's like you're following you, and people get to see your hands because the way the nature of it, they show the hands on TV. Aren't you worried what people are going to think and say about you? Because in our industry, it's a very judgmental industry. People will say, "Oh my God, why did he do that?" This and that.
So bad.
Yeah, we watched a little bit of something last night with my daughter, and she was like, "They're all being mean to each other."
Oh,
yeah. It can be. It can definitely be that way, especially like at the higher levels where people really critique your strategies and your thoughts. And for some reason in that moment, it was so clear to me, which is what's so clear to me in this moment, which is that, look, what I said to the reporter is that, like, look, I'm only like as good as I am. And like, people are going to see me make mistakes on television. And if people see me make mistakes, then I guess they get to see the real me. And that's kind of how I live my life. And I mean that because it's kind of like one of the things that I just aspire to do in this world is to just be authentic and just be who I am, because that's all anyone really wants to know and be around. And the people that don't, they'll just not be in my life, and they'll say like, okay, that guy, like he's too emotional, or he's too this or too that, and they won't want to be around me. But the people that do, they get to have that, they get to be that. And I think as long as I'm coming from that place, then yeah, sure, it's gonna hurt sometimes when people say, this or that about like who I really am. But I think that would be like the biggest disservice I could ever do when I look back on my life. And that's how I live my life. I live my life from like my deathbed looking backwards. And one of the questions I ask myself is, did people really know me? Mm-hmm. And I've made it true that I'll be able to answer that and say, people got to know who I really was. And I think about that a lot. And yeah, it's sometimes it hurts and sometimes it's hard. And that's why I have a support system of people that, really allow me to be. And, I'll lean into them when it's messy and hard. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think people will get to know who I am. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but that brings me comfort.
Yeah, and it does, because I think that what you said at the very end around it being a disservice if you don't show up, if you stay at home because you're, scared of what they're going to say. Think of all the things that you're pulling from people that could otherwise be learning from you in all different ways. I like that.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing too, I guess, to kind of like more directly answer it, is that for the people that are watching and listening, people want to know who you are. There are people in your life that are dying to know what you really think, what you really feel, what you really love, like what really makes you come alive. And when you withhold that from those people, you know, as we were kind of mentioning, you're doing them a disservice. And that's the kind of stuff that as you reveal and share, your relationships become more full and more bright and full of color. And I think another big thing that like I learned from Brene Brown, and like we listen to all these teachers and people, is start with the people that really deserve that space. You know, maybe it's your mom or your sister or your best friend. You know, start with them and really go into it with them. And I think that that's a safe place to start, and it's a really good place.
I like that. So one of my last questions, you guys have a lot going on. You do a lot. You are of service to other people. What do you do, or who do you look to, or what do you read when you guys need a personal reset to kind of send you back out? I know you talked about meditation and exercise, but what is your go-to thing that helps you reset?
So for me, yeah, meditation and exercise, but also I probably haven't read as much as Kristy has, or probably even that I should, to be learning other things. For me, what I really love to do is to disconnect and unplug from the world. You know, no phone, no internet, like go out in nature. And one thing I do is like I'll take my dog, even if it's simple as just going on a walk with like no phone, no music, just kind of like an active meditation where you kind of like let things come in and just see how they feel. And I think that like that calm space where I can just like let all the noise go away and let everything settle and let it come and let it go. For me, that's where I'm able to be my most creative, my most effective as a husband and as a friend. And so I would say the second part to that is that I would very much enjoy doing more reading, because I think there are some amazing teachers out there. I mean, you can just look on YouTube and get, you know, do TED Talks for however long and, you know, find this and that. So yeah, I mean, seek out like the really good information from the people. Like if you have people in your life, or, you know, like for example, if we're watching a Brene Brown TED Talk and she suggests like this book around mindfulness or something, listen to the people that you have the respect for. And if they're telling you this is a great way for you to expand, you know, your business, your relationships or whatever, then I think that's a really good place to start as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm just laughing because he's like talking about disconnecting and not reading maybe as much as I do. And I'm laughing because one, we literally just got probably 10 to 15 boxes from Amazon because now he wants to take up camping. Like some camping socks, what are those things called? Hammocks. Like they all just came in the mail. So I was just laughing at that. And I was also laughing at how we are both so alike in so many ways, also so different, you know, like that's his thing. And I like to read all the books and listen to all the things and to get all the coaching. And so, you know, we really pull forth that in each other, because I was like, oh, I'm going to have to go camping now and unplug and like, but I know it's good for me. And the same with him, pretty much. He's read all the books that I read, because every time I read them, I just,
Right.
you know, because like the other day he was like talking to someone. He's like, have you ever read the 4 Agreements? Here are the 4 Agreements. And I'm like, you've never read the 4 Agreements, but I love that you're coaching somebody else on the 4 Agreements, because it's like osmosis or something.
So it's your own version of Cliff Notes. It's just Kristy Notes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm really fortunate to have the Kristy Notes. So that's
yeah. He did the 7 habits. He's like, begin with the end in mind. I'm like, yep, transferred.
That's hysterical. By the way, camping's not horrible.
I know. I okay. I take your word for it. I'll find that out.
So I grew up camping, and we had never camped as a family, and I asked for camping gear one Christmas from my husband, which probably seems ridiculous. And I got this beautiful chair lounger thing that I sleep in. And it's like not a hammock, but it's like a proper chair that you just tilt
Oh,
back, and it's like sleeping in a bed. So maybe that might be something you should look into.
yeah, that sounds good. He's convincing me that if we have nice stuff, it'll be a nice time. So
Yeah,
cool.
and then
We'll
you only
see.
have to buy it once.
Yeah, that's true.
That's very true. And camping for us really is the one time, I mean, we can turn off our phones at home as much as we want. We can make sure that we sit around the table for dinner as much as we want to try it. But there's something about camping that just really removes the exterior, and it's just you. It's super cool. Okay, last question. I know you guys talked about your giving keys. Andrew, yours is courage, and Kristy, yours is believe. Are those your personal mantras? Do you have anything else that goes kind of into a personal mantra space that you'd like to share?
I have a personal mantra, actually. I think one, well, there's really two that I really, really think about a lot. One is that I really believe, and it's so cliche, but it's the one that just like I live my life by. That's that you get out what you put in. And like, it's so simple. You can look at everything in your life and you can say, like, I could ask you, like, what percent effort have you put into this relationship, career, your body? And they can say like 40%, 60%. And there's almost always a really strong correlation between what they put in and where they're at. And so I'm always thinking about like, what effort am I putting into this? And, you know, not making it right or wrong, just understanding, okay, well, I'm 40%. I've chosen that for a reason. And maybe I'm fine with 40%. Maybe I want that to be 60. And, you know, we have to spin all the plates and figure out which ones to spin and, you know, how they slow down. And the other thing is that, like, as I mentioned earlier, it's not really a mantra, but it's like what I live my life by is I live my life from my deathbed looking back with all the questions that I'm going to have on my deathbed, all of the things that I'm going to ask myself, did I do in my life? I'm trying to answer those questions now so that when I'm there, did I risk? Did I go for it all the way in my career? I want to know the limits of what I can be in this world. I want to know those limits. I want to see them. I want to hit them head on. And I want to experience what that's like. And so when I'm on my deathbed, I can like just smile and know, you know, man, like, yeah, I, you know, maybe I went all the way in this thing and maybe I didn't go all the way there. And I think my wife is a perfect example of me, you know, knowing that, you know, I went all the way in my relationship and I was able to have the relationship of my dreams. So I would say those two things are my, I guess, life mantras.
I am, this is a tough one for me. I'm just trying to think of the things that I tell myself all the time. And I think just the most important one, because I do the same, like, you know, deathbed looking back, like, what do I hope people will say about me? You know, what will my legacy be? And because we build that every day with the choices that we make. But the one reminder and mantra that I tell myself all the time is slow down, or this is it. Because I tend to want to go really fast, or if I get caught up in, and this is just a really quick visual of it, but we were this summer, we went to go crash basically his brother's and his brother's wife's honeymoon. And our trip there was like the craziest, worst travel experiences of all time. Like, it was just kind of crazy how we just missed things and what was happening. And at like midnight, when we had to figure out where to go, and all we wanted to do was just start our vacation. And we're walking down this dark hallway inside an airport in Germany. And I just grabbed his arm and I was like trying to hurry because we needed to get the shuttle. And I was like, slow down. And I was like, this is it. This is it. This is life. This is the moment. This is it. Right now is all I have. And I'm like, who's to say this isn't our vacation right now? You know, like, maybe this is just an adventure I get to have with my husband, and we get to just have fun with each other and figure it out. But I would miss it if I didn't just like remind myself, like, this is it.
Yeah, I like that. I could sit here and keep asking you question after question after question, because this is really good. Thank you both so much for being vulnerable and honest, and even more than vulnerable and honest, just really willing. I mean, I think we can be honest and not be willing to share and not willing to impact. So thank you for all of those things. I will share all of your goodness with links and all of that jazz. So we won't do that now, but I just want to acknowledge both of you for not only the work that you're doing with each other, because that's a hugely impressive, and I think just it's just beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see your commitment to each other, and also the work that you do with others.
Thank you. And if I could just really quickly acknowledge you. We just met briefly, all three of us met at a conference, and just the way that you show up is just so loving and present. And earlier we talked about how, like, share your story with people who have earned the right, or people who are going to handle your story with care and be with you. And you just really, I knew that we could talk about these things with you, because you just hold that space. And I just want to acknowledge you for creating this in the first place, because I know it's not all rainbows and unicorns all the time. And what you're doing, though, is in service and is making a giant difference. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that and creating that space that we could do this with you today.
Thanks. Now we need that big hug.
I know, like big virtual hug.
Well, and I have to just say, so we did meet at the conference, Lewis House's Summit of Greatness conference, and you guys had just gotten your lunch and came and popped over to where I was sitting. And it was so funny because you mentioned this earlier, that Andrew's a collector of people. And it was so funny because it could have just easily been a discussion around what you guys had for lunch and we moved on. But you both, you're both so intent on listening and asking questions. So that was what really drew me to both of you as well. So anyway, glad to be connected.
He collected you.
Totally.
We got a new friend.
I got a new friend. Meet my new friend.
Do you still have the bus?
No.
You sold it.
That was a fun chapter. A 3-year chapter.
We'll have I'll be on your virtual bus.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank
you so much.